rules-based order, which America created after World War II, is now clearly and firmly gone. If the US Navy just showed up and the US just unfurled an American flag in Greenland, what could Denmark do?
Nothing. The moral higher ground that the West pretended to have during generations is completely gone. Now it's about America first. Nobody should dispute the fact that Russia annexes 1/3 or 1/4 of Ukraine. Then why should China not take over North Korea, or not to speak of Taiwan also? I can't imagine France or Germany sending troops to Greenland to protect Greenland against the American invasion.
Welcome to FO Talks. With me is our old friend Jean-Daniel Ruch. He is an eminent Swiss diplomat. He's now retired. He spends much of his time walking the mountains of his native Switzerland, picking mushrooms, plucking apples, and of course speaking to friends like me. Welcome, Jean-Daniel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here, Atul, and I wish you a Happy New Year. And
Happy New Year to you too.
To all your viewers.
Happy New Year to all our viewers. Now, today we'll be discussing Donald Trump's Art of the New Deal. And this is a title that Jean-Daniel came up with. So, Jean-Daniel, tell us, what is this New Deal and what is this Art of the New Deal?
Well, we all know that Donald Trump wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. And in the notion of Art of the Deal, you have two concepts. The first one is art. Art, by definition, is not a science, which makes it very unpredictable. And this is what we all don't like as analysts of what's going on in the world. But also as businessmen, as people running a small or a big company, we don't like unpredictability.
Yeah.
But art means unpredictability almost by definition. And the second concept which is there is deal. As we have seen since Donald Trump came back to power, he's not so much into established rules, he's into making deals. So we are back, and deals for a New York real estate person like Donald Trump means it's about power, it's about force, it's about meeting interests, it's not about values. And these two notions have enshrined themselves, or have been enshrined by the Trump team in a document which, in my view, is a strategic break with the past. And I'm talking about the new security policy strategy of the United States, which has been released on the 4th of December 2025.
This is the one.
2020, yeah. This one, exactly, that document, which is truly a break with the past. It's a break for several reasons. Maybe the most impressive or obvious change is that it sets a very clear set of priorities, starting with the Western Hemisphere. We want to be the masters in our own house. This is the Doctrine Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine, adapted to the 21st century. And we have seen with Venezuela a first actually implementation of the principles set in the strategy. Secondly,
this is the section you're talking about.
Yes. Yes,
it's very clear. As you can see, I've highlighted and read it multiple times.
You studied carefully.
Yeah.
The second thing which is striking is that Russia, China are not described as threats or enemies, which used to be the case before, but rather as sort of difficult partners. In the case of China, it is described as an economic competitor. In the case of Russia, as a country with which a new strategic stability has to be found. And of course, Ukraine is in the middle of this strategic stability to be found. But there is a third element which has been maybe a bit more unnoticed, and it is that there is absolutely zero ideological painting to this strategy. You remember the Biden years and also the years of all the previous presidents who were talking about democracy, who were defining the world as a kind of fight between the democracies and the autocracies. Nothing of that sort. This is sheer force-power relationship which are defining the world under Trump's art of the New Deal.
So this is a complete Zeitenwende, to use a German word. The Germans never quite achieved it under Olaf Scholz, but Donald Trump has. The rules-based order, which America created after World War II, is now clearly and firmly gone.
Well, I never really liked the concept of rules-based order because it's an American way not to say respect for international law. Because when, there is a different, international law is universally valid, and the rules approved in international treaties, in the Charter of the UN and many other conventions have a universal value, and they have been negotiated and approved and signed and ratified by all member states of these treaties. When you speak about rules-based international order, you mean our rules. So I never really liked this kind of concept. But you're absolutely right. This Trump administration doesn't even try to assume, to pretend that what they are doing has some sort of legal or moral validity. The moral higher ground that the West pretended to have during generations is completely gone. Now it's about America first, the American interests first, and whatever has been approved in the international system, which has been created actually mostly by the Americans following World War II, all these notions of international law, human rights, democracy, all this seems to have been forgotten. And the result is that, this is purely selfish foreign policy. He's ready to put pressure even on very close allies. Look at Denmark and Greenland. This is completely new also. Well, yes, the Americans tried to buy Greenland before, even after the Second World War.
They've tried twice.
They've
tried twice in the past, but both of them were gentlemanly offers.
Yes. But here, apparently, they are serious, and God knows what kind of pressure they can try to put on the EU or on Denmark to force them to accept an increased American presence or maybe even American sovereignty over Greenland. So it seems that we're moving to a world which is not just pre-Second World War or pre-First World War, where the whole idea that we would have an international system based on the law, a civilized system based on the law, with lots of imperfection, and it really never really worked. But still, there was this intention over the long term to achieve an international system based on the law. This has been totally abandoned. And you can even say that maybe we are not just going back to the 19th century, but maybe even long time before, maybe even to before the Treaty of Westphalia, which at least for the European system created the notion that you have states who have relations based on the law, based on some treaties, and all this seems to be totally forgotten today. It is about power games, and interests, and at the end of the day, the key issue is control of the important, crucial resources for the future.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned the Treaty of Westphalia, because some of our viewers may not know that Europe went through religious wars for a very long time.
30 years.
Yeah, 30 years. There was a 30 years war, 1618 to 1648. Many Germans died. In fact, many others died, but this was fought especially all through Germany. And eventually, the Treaty of Westphalia created the modern states-based system, which, as Europe expanded and Europe colonized the world, came to form the basis of the modern world.
I think you can say that, yes. I think Europe, by the way, it was not just in Germany.
True.
In the mountain just behind me, there were Swedish troops which rampaged the region. And that left memories until today. I think Europe lost 1/3 of its population during the wars of religion between 1618 and 1648. So that was a major disaster. And as you say, the Treaty of Westphalia enshrined something that became the basis for international relations as we have known them ever since and until today. Now it seems that nothing like that is valid anymore under Trump. Of course, the question which is in the mind of many leaders, especially in Europe, but probably elsewhere also, is what is going to happen in 3 years? Many here are hoping to wait out Trump in the hope that under our next president, things will come back to normal and the US will reintegrate the international order as we have known it before.
Well, we'll get to that. As of now, the New Deal that you allude to is basically we are back to a Hobbesian world. The post-1648 world is out. Now America is nakedly an empire, which is turning even on its allies. America did conduct a spectacular raid in Venezuela. You could argue that this was an illegal raid. This breached principles of state sovereignty. Maduro arguably had immunity because he was a leader of a state. But of course, Americans make the claim that he had rigged the election. He was running a criminal regime. And therefore they had the right to pick him up, and he was opposing American interests. He was a bit like an Adolf Hitler figure, I suppose, if not a Saddam Hussein figure, if not an Adolf Hitler figure. But turning on Greenland, which Donald Trump is making the case is important for us, and Trump views Greenland as part of the Western Hemisphere. That is the new, and the manner in which Trump is turning on Greenland, and the disdain which this document, the National Security Strategy, has for Europe, is very telling. What do you say about these new developments that have suddenly propped up?
Well, I think that the crude reality is coming to the surface without any sort of ideological painting or anything that could justify what has happened. They have tried to justify that it's a law enforcement, he's a bad guy, he's a drug trafficker. I mean, nothing like that is very serious. You have the right to use force in international relations only in two circumstances. Whether there is a decision of the Security Council authorizing a state or a group of states to use force, and this is the liberation of Kuwait from Saddam Hussein by George H. Bush, which was sort of the model example of the use of force in international relations. And then you have the other example, which is legitimate defense. But to call legitimate defense as an argument to use force against a country, then you have to know what legitimate defense is. And there are two aspects that define legitimate defense. One, there must be an imminent threat on the security of the United States. And second one, a direct one. Now, in the case of Venezuela, I really don't see how you could argue that there was a direct and imminent threat on the security of the United States. So I think we all understand that the name of the game is elsewhere. There is a very strong interest to pass a message to all the countries in Latin America that America is back and America wants to be the leader and the control the Western Hemisphere, meaning...
I mean, it's there in the national security strategy, the
very clear.
corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. It's in black and white. And
Yes.
now they're calling it the Monroe Doctrine.
Yes, absolutely. And what they did in Venezuela proves that they want to be serious, or at least to appear to be serious in the implementation, at least of that part of the strategy. But of course, we know that behind that, Venezuela is a country on the earth so far with the largest proven reserves of oil. And we know also from other actions of Donald Trump, for instance, the Anchorage summit, his relation with Saudi Arabia, his threats over Iran, that Donald Trump sees as a priority for the future of the United States, and maybe for good reasons, to have a dominance on the energy market, meaning the oil market in the world, which they have lost. And the fact that the oil transactions or energy transactions nowadays are increasingly being carried out not in dollar. Is it the end of the petrodollar? This is a question, but definitely the petrodollar is weakening, and more of these transactions are being operated in other currencies, sometimes local currencies. That's a big threat for the future well-being of the United States, the well-being of the United States, depending on a strong dollar and depending on the management of the debt, on countries around the world continuing to purchase American debt.
So this operation scares other countries, or is an effort to scare other countries to keep using the petrodollar and to keep buying US debt. Is that what you're getting at?
I think that's what he has not talked about the debt. But you know how it works in the world of finance. When you have a debt, you want your creditors want you to have collaterals as an insurance. Now, to have collaterals, you need commodities. What are the commodities that the United States can oppose to the huge debt that they have? Control of the oil market would be would be key as a collateral. The second thing, and that concerns the petrodollar, I think Trump and his team, they have said very clearly that they won't accept transactions, or they will put pressure on countries which are doing transactions in oil, which are not in dollar. So that's a very clearly stated objective of this administration. On that point, they're very transparent.
All right. And this brings us to the point about Greenland. Greenland becomes valuable because the Arctic is melting. There is a new Arctic sea route emerging. Russia has already claimed a lot of the Arctic seabed and is the leader in exploiting Arctic resources. But the US wants to exploit resources in Greenland, rare earths, mining for rare earths, drilling for oil and gas. And the US has said, or the Trump administration has clearly said, and Trump himself has said, that Greenland is critical to America's national security. Is this a play for national resources as well? And is this a cheap play because Denmark is too weak to do anything?
Well, I think there are two aspects in the interest of the United States for Greenland. Let's start with the rare earth or minerals.
Okay.
Today, China is controlling something like 90% of the production and refinement of rare earth. I think the American elite, Trump has realized that this is not sustainable. They cannot depend over the long term on China.
And just our viewers should know that during the trade negotiations, and when Trump had slapped tariffs on China, China responded by cutting off access to rare earths and magnets and other critical components. So they also flex their muscles.
Absolutely, and the stakes are immensely high for all the high-tech industry in the Silicon Valley and elsewhere in the United States. So that's the first thing. The Americans
and the military ones too, because F-16s and F-35s also need them.
Well,
So
anything that relies on the computers at the end of the day will need that and transmission. So that's one thing. They need to build their own indigenous capability to be much less reliant on China. The second thing has to do with the new trade routes. The basis of power of the, let's say, Anglo-Saxon world, first the British and then the Americans, has been the control of the trade routes.
Yeah. We are going back to Harold Mackinder.
This is
Jean-Daniel Ruch. Exactly.
Absolutely
the father of geopolitics.
Mm-hmm. This is the basics of geopolitics.
Yeah.
And now there is this brand new trade, not world, but trade route, which is slowly, it will still take time until the ice melts sufficiently to have a new trade route through the Arctic open the whole year. I think what they are contemplating is until 2050, something like 3 to 6 months a year. But the Russians have built a fleet of icebreakers. I think the Americans have built one icebreaker since the end of the Second World War. So there again, there is something to be done because they have lost some of their comparative advantage towards the Russians and the Chinese. And if you look on a map, you will see that the Arctic is an entry point that Greenland is an entry point to the Arctic, but it's also a way to control with the radar systems, with everything, what's going on in the Arctic, as they are controlling the Suez Canal, the Malacca Strait, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, Gibraltar, and all the other key points of
Panama, not to forget Panama Canal.
Of course, Panama also. And by the way, we have also heard about, he hasn't spoken about Panama recently, but we know that there is a very strong Chinese penetration in Panama. There is a very strong Chinese penetration in Venezuela, and I believe that one of the objectives is also to kick out the Chinese from Latin America, which will be very difficult. I'm not sure at all that you can describe the operation in Venezuela so far as a success. And by the way, speaking of Panama, this operation in Venezuela very much reminds of the arrest of Noriega when was that 1985, I think, under Reagan.
It was under George Bush Sr. or
was it already George Bush Sr.? Okay.
Yeah, 1989, I believe, if I remember correctly, under Manuel Noriega. And Noriega fled to the Vatican embassy, and they had to play loud rock music to flush him out. In contrast, this is a more spectacular operation under a much bigger, against a much bigger country with a far higher number of military personnel, and they took Maduro in a single night. I mean, I hear rumors that people in the Venezuelan regime were paid off. Perhaps the current replacement got some cash. Venezuelans didn't really die fighting to defend Maduro. It was the Cubans who did. So there seem to be wheels within wheels. It seems to be, a fantastic intelligence / military operation in terms of getting Maduro from Caracas. Now, what happens next? Who knows? I have no idea where this is headed.
Well, tactically, it was a brilliant operation. Can they transform that into a strategic victory?
Yes.
Now, the test will be whether the major, Chevron, ExxonMobil, will be allowed back into Venezuela to operate the oil fields, invest in the oil fields.
And the other big question is, will they be confident enough to invest huge sums of money, because it is heavy crude, a lot of it is offshore, and investment figures bandied around are anything from 50 to 100 billion, 50 plus to 100 billion plus.
Well, that will depend on the government and the institutions that will rule over Venezuela following this coup. Was it a coup? I don't know. This abduction, you could say. So far, the signs are not very positive for the Americans. I mean, the new president has been sworn in. The three first ambassadors she received was the Russian, the Chinese, and the Iranians, from all people. Her statements are not very encouraging for the Americans. So what are the options on the table? It seems to me that what the Americans are now trying to do is to operate some kind of blockade of the ports so as to prevent the oil from being exported. They are even attacking Russian oil tankers very far away from Venezuela sea waters, in international waters, which is, in my view, a quite worrisome development. I mean, how can the Russians accept that?
My naive question to you is, Russia has plenty of oil itself. Why are Russian oil tankers all the way in Venezuelan waters? What are they doing there?
They were not in Venezuelan waters, but apparently they were heading for Venezuelan waters.
Why are they headed to Venezuela?
Good question. You know, this business is very intransparent. I would be surprised if the Russians were helping the Venezuelans to export their oil, hoping that a Russian flagged vessel would be immune to American inspection or to the American blockade. But this is speculation. Anyway, this is also a new development, and this comes just a few days after the Russians pretend that with the help of the Americans, residence of Putin was heavily bombed by drones towards the end of last year. So that does not bode well for the future of the Russian-American relations, despite what is written in the strategy. And then this comes from, this for me, that's another question, maybe another topic we can address, is the new national strategy speaks of talking to the Russians to find some new strategic stability. Now, if we look at the real interest of the Americans, I believe it is about joint operation of some of the new oil fields which have been found in the Arctic. By the way, the Arctic is also about resources. And Chevron had signed an agreement with the Russians back in the 2010s, which has been frozen. But I'm pretty sure Chevron would love to go back, and Trump would love the majors to go back. By the way, this has been one of the point of agreement that has been published after the Anchorage summit between Trump and Putin. So it seems to me that there are some forces who want to kill these sort of arrangements. And the question is, did Trump himself give the order to take this Russian cargo? Was he aware of what happened with this residence of Putin in Valdai? Well, the Ukrainians and the West is denying that anything like that happened. What seems to me is that there are some divergences within the security policy establishment in the or foreign policy establishment in the United States of America, between the vision of Trump and his close team. In his close team, I could see Tulsi Gabbard, I could see Vance, and certainly a few others. And what Tulsi Gabbard refers to as a deep state, which would like to continue business as always, as they did before. And who is going to win? I mean, the bets are open.
I see. So your estimation is that there is a rift between the new Trump policymakers at the top and the deep state, which wants to carry on as usual, and that rift will play out in the coming years.
Yes, and you could even say that this so-called deep state, it sounds conspiracy, but there are certainly interests or undercurrents which are connected to Europe also, who do not see under a positive eye this new strategy of the Americans. And this has been expressed very clearly on 20 December by Tulsi Gabbard. You may remember that on 19 December, Reuters published a piece saying that the US intelligence community believes that Russia would be in a position to attack Europe within a limited number of years. And Tulsi Gabbard went ballistic. And the next day, she published a comment on Twitter X saying this is a maneuver of the deep state to sabotage our peace efforts with Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. And this rift appeared very clearly in the public at that moment. And that's why I have this tendency nowadays to try to analyze each and every move of the United States, also under the angle of who's profiting from this or that action.
Understood. So no longer is the American security establishment coherent. No longer does politics stop at the shore, as the cliche went during the Cold War. Now the fractures have come home, or the chickens have come home to roost, and the fishes are there to see.
Well, this is at least what seems to appear from this latest clash between the Reuters or whoever leaked this information about an imminent Russian invasion of Western Europe, and Tulsi Gabbard, who is after all the director of national intelligence and is supposed to oversee the work of somewhere between 100 and 120,000 employees of the intelligence community in the United States. All those people who wake up every morning and
go to office
to think, what can I do for the security of my country?
All right. So what about Greenland? Let's talk about Greenland.
Green. What's the question about Green?
Greenland, does
Greenland. I thought we were talking about Marjorie Green.
No, not quite. So, a question about Greenland. Let's talk about Greenland. Does the US just take over? The costs, military costs of taking over Greenland wouldn't be high. 57,000 people. They already have a big base there.
I don't understand why they make such a fuss about sovereignty. Honestly. I made last year. I was offering a course on diplomatic negotiations to my students in Geneva, and I made a simulation precisely on that issue. That was like February or March of 2025. So it was at the beginning when Trump had started to speak about Greenland, and it was very obvious what the result of any negotiations would be. The Danish, together with the Greenland leadership, were absolutely ready to give more rights to the Americans to extend their military bases and to extend their military presence in Greenland. On the other hand, they were also ready to grant some licenses to mining companies from the United States to exploit some of the resources. And in return, there were some expectations that, of course, Greenland would get a share of the profits, but also that the United States would invest heavily in infrastructure, because there are apparently huge, there are possibilities, let's say, to invest in infrastructure. So why not have maybe my students are too civilized, because they were acting as reasonable and rational future diplomats or employees of international organizations. And
they mainly Swiss, or did they come from all around the world?
Mostly Africans.
Mostly Africans. Okay.
But I'm very impressed by the maturity and the understanding of the essence of negotiation, of bargaining, that Africans can bring, that sometimes we're forgotten here in Europe. So they were reasonable, and it was pretty obvious, what are your interests, what are my interests, how can we combine both? And the deal was relatively easy, and I had several teams working on the same issue, and they almost all came with the same rough solution. I don't see why such a solution could not be done, and maybe this is where we are going to go to. This is what we are going to reach. But then you have to speak about, and we go back to the art and the concept of art. Because in a reasonable world, you would say Trump would go to the Prime Minister of Denmark, he would maybe call the Prime Minister of Greenland to join in the talks and say, look, this is very important for us because the Russians, the Arctic, blah, 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 and the mining and the Chinese. So can we find an agreement? Can we find a deal? I mean, that's what you and me would probably try to do if we consider we have a very strong interest and we are ready to invest there. But Trump is not working like that. He starts by flexing the muscles, threatening, bullying, and then he hopes people will be so frightened that he will achieve a better deal. I'm not sure this is a very good tactics.
Well, it did work in the real estate world.
Yeah, but this is not the real estate world, precisely. So, okay, he starts to bully and so on, and then he sends Witkoff, who knows how to do real estate deals, to try to sort out something. I don't know if he's going to do that. Now he has appointed a special envoy for Greenland. I think the Danes are very angry at that. So this creates so much animosity with the counterpart, in the case Denmark, but also all the Europeans, and even the people in Greenland. They cannot accept what Donald Trump is saying. That actually it may make a whole reasonable negotiation impossible.
Let me ask you a question that makes Europeans quite uncomfortable. If we've gone back to the world where might is right, if the US Navy just showed up and the US just unfurled an American flag in Greenland, what could Denmark do?
Nothing. They could call a meeting of the Security Council. They could call a meeting of the Council of the European Union in Brussels. They could issue statements, but I don't see Denmark, or I don't even see the EU showing solidarity with Denmark in providing military assistance. No, I can't imagine France or Germany sending troops to Greenland to protect Greenland against the American invasion. I cannot even imagine Brussels taking sanctions against the United States as they did sanctions against Russia. So I'm really not sure what they can do. Maybe they can try to talk economics and so on, and then to talk towards a deal, towards a kind of deal I've been mentioning, and then Trump could say, yeah, victory, thanks to my wonderful capacity, the best capacity of the best president in the history of the US. I got the best deal ever that any president has achieved. So that would, I think that would be a realistic outcome of something like that. But if they send the 101st Airborne Division in Greenland, I think we will all watch, and what can we do? Nobody can do anything there.
Yeah.
Maybe the Russians will propose a treaty of defensive alliance with Denmark or with the European Union, but it's unlikely that this could be accepted.
Now, this is an argument that many Americans are making. And they say, look, Denmark, after all, was an imperial power. It took over Greenland. And Greenland only has had autonomy for comparatively recently. And so what right does Denmark have to Greenland? And perhaps,
This is a line of argumentation which is offering a Pandora box.
Exactly.
It's not sustainable, because when formally speaking, when the United States recognized Denmark, established diplomatic relations, it also recognized Denmark in its current borders, and the current borders include Greenland. Mm-hmm. So these arguments are stupid. It is as saying we don't recognize the legitimacy of the United States over New Mexico, California, Arizona, Nevada, because they were taken by force in an illegal war. You can say that we don't recognize the rights of others than the indigenous people on the American continent because they were the victim of a genocide. I said, I mean, this is not a serious argument that you can make.
No, but the reason I raised it is that a lot of states are flailing, they are failing, and they are fracturing, and we can see them around the world. I'm not saying Denmark is.
Denmark is not, certainly not.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying Denmark is a well-functioning state. Greenlanders get great health care now. They get subsidies, all of that. So I'm not making the argument that Greenland is exploited today. But my point is that what happened after 1945 is in some ways a historical aberration, because states and regions and peoples were constantly conquered, colonized, boundaries grew, boundaries shrunk, and perhaps we are going back to the future. Perhaps we are just reverting to the mean.
Well, that's what we're saying at the beginning. Maybe we don't recognize the sovereignty of the states anymore, and everything is good for grab, provided that the authority on that territory is weak and that you are stronger. Now, if that's the future of the world, this is not a very encouraging picture, because it means that nobody should dispute the fact that Russia annexes 1/3 or 1/4 of Ukraine. Then why should China not take over North Korea, or not to speak of Taiwan also? Mm-hmm. So this kind of attitude is a blank check to any power, big or small. Why wouldn't Turkey annex the parts of Syria they control, for instance? Why not? According to this kind
of... They were part of the Ottoman Empire, so
they have a good argument, and they can say that the Sykes-Picot agreement that divided the Middle East or the Ottoman Empire, the Arab part of the Ottoman Empire, between the French and the British was totally illegal, and they have to review the treaties which, after the First World War, divided the Ottoman Empire. I'm sure Erdogan would love that. But this is not...
De facto, just to stop you there, since you've raised Syria, Jean-Daniel, de facto, Syria is now a bunch of regions that are run by different armed groups. The Druze have gone with the Israelis. The Alawites are on the coasts in their mountains. Of course, Ahmad al-Shara, as Jolani now calls himself, is very much in bed with MIT, and you were ambassador in Turkey. You know Turkey really well. And the Kurds have their own enclave, and of course even the Arabs in the mountains, they don't really particularly like Jolani. So Syria has fractured, Lebanon has really fractured. So the states are already fracturing. And I'm not even talking about Sudan or Mali or Chad or, Libya.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right. So maybe that's the future. But this is really bringing us to a pre-Westphalia Treaty times, where any state which shows weaknesses, divisions, can be disassembled, and that the powerful neighbors would take bits and pieces, and this would be. But the question is, how do you get legitimacy for this sort of stealing of land? Until now, you would receive legitimacy first through a vote of the people, a vote usually of self-determination, and then this vote would be recognized by the international institutions or big states. In the case of Kosovo, the UN has not recognized the independence of Kosovo, but you have such a critical mass of states which have recognized Kosovo that it has become a fact.
De facto, it's independent.
De facto.
Yeah.
Let's say if Israel annexes Quneitra and part of the Druze region in Syria. This will be seen as illegitimate until somebody says it's legitimate. So
they can organize a referendum, the Druze can vote that they want to be part of Israel, then America recognizes, then other states recognize. Eventually, they'll have some legitimacy.
Yeah, but I think even that is not enough. Then you should also, in my view, to be perfectly legitimate, there should also be a bilateral agreement with Damascus, where Damascus is saying, okay, we recognize the expressed will of the population of Quneitra to join Israel, or of Aleppo to join Turkey. But that would be the right way to organize a secession process. Unfortunately, it never happens like that in the world. Look at the Golan Heights.
They've taken it. The Israelis have taken it.
The Golan Heights have been seized by Israel in 1967. They have been annexed formally by Israel in 1980. You have numerous Security Council and General Assembly resolutions of the UN who say this is a Syrian occupied territory and it's not Israel. And, Donald Trump first, he recognized that the Golan belonged to Israel, so he recognized this annexation, where the population was never consulted. And of course, there was no deal with the Syrian government, which will never recognize this annexation. So is that the world into we are entering today? Well, it's possible. I'm not sure this will make it easier to have sort of stability, security, and prosperity for everyone in the world. It seems to me it will rather be an even bigger jungle that we are entering into, if that's the case. But maybe this is what will happen. I believe that, I hope at one point, not immediately, but in 3-4 years from now, and I hope we will not need to go to the verge of a real disaster like a nuclear war or a war between nuclear powers in the world. I continue to believe that one day it should be possible for the three major powers in this world, meaning Russia, China, and the United States, to sit together and find a way. I think the key is really the duopolar. I don't like to speak about a bipolar world because that's
the Cold War.
I don't think we want the world to be depressed and then high and with no signs of bipolarity. But if we speak of a duopole between China and the United States, I think that could help bring back some sort of stability and especially predictability in international relations. But definitely right now we are entering a phase of high instability because the precedent of Venezuela, depending how it works out, may legitimize foolish actions from other actors, either big powers or mid-sized powers.
On that note, Jean-Daniel, thank you very much for your time. The New Deal seems to be a more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. This is VUCA, as the Pentagon likes calling it, and it may increase risks of, shall we say, miscalculation, misjudgments, and potential conflicts. But you've sounded a note of optimism. You've said that perhaps there's still time and there's still opportunity for the big powers to sit together and pull back from the brink, and may that be the case. We will continue our conversation. Thank you very, very much for your time. And for all our viewers, it's Happy New Year again. All the best for 2026.
Thank you, Atul. Pleasure.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.